And I'm recording as well. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Contrarians. We have our esteemed colleagues from Patreon here ready to discuss Queen, and the album that we're going to be discussing today is Hot Space. So we'll kind of go around. I'm actually going to throw it over to Martin first, but he's going to give us a little bit of a background and some factoids. And we're going to kind of go around, and each person's going to give their yay or nay on Queen Hot Space and tell us why or why not you like the album. And we'll try to keep it concise. We got quite a few folks here tonight, so maybe like 5 minutes each, and then that should be enough time, I think. But I'm going to throw it over to Martin, and he's going to give us a little bit of a thing, and he's going to go first this time. So take it away, Martin.
Thanks. Yeah, actually, a cool thing to do would be at the end of your thing, maybe give it a rating out of 10. And, we'll write down and see what it adds up to out of 10 on this as well. So yeah, we've got a lot of people. We should try keep this. I'm even thinking like try to stay to 4 minutes, and I'm going to try in the spirit of do this really quickly as well. So I thought I'd go first just to lay out some facts about this album. So Hot Space, it was recorded first using Mountain Studios in Montreux, Switzerland, and that's where you get some of the more traditional stuff. And then second, they were working at Musicland Munich. This thing came out May 21st, 1982. News of the World was 4 times platinum. Jazz was platinum. The Game was 4 times platinum. This only went gold. Just wanted to mention from this book, this Queen album by album, which is actually still in print. I just wanted to read a quick Mac quote here. Because Mac I talked to Mac for the chapter on Hot Space. He said everything was different because the band were at a point where they weren't quite sure whether it was better to split up or do something completely different or even turn up in the studio. It was mostly one person at a time, which made it kind of hard to record a band. So a lot of my technique of making loops and making stuff up where nothing was, just to fill turned into a pretty tough chore. You had to make drum beats and get a bass groove going. I programmed synthesizer there, and next day someone else would come in, let me hear what you did, and I'm not so sure about this or that, but let me try put guitar on. And since it wasn't heavy on guitars, Brian didn't really fancy it. And then he left again. And then Deaky left again. It was very scattered for me, excessively difficult to hold together. You can't really crack the whip and tell people, come on, pull yourself together, let's do something. That doesn't work with that band at all. I just had to make do with what there was. Freddie liked it a lot because it was danceable and he was into that sort of thing, at least at the time. Deaky liked it because it was groove heavy, and Roger liked it to some extent. So yeah, it gradually came forward. It took 9 months or something. And then I just wanted to mention what Daniel Nestor said. He was a bit of a Queen expert that I had for this book as well. This whole series, I did 5 of these, and most aren't in print, but the idea was just to get some experts like you guys and do a Q&A on every studio album. So he says, the changes, there are 2 camps now. One camp is John Deacon and Freddie Mercury, who wants to capitalize on the musical, financial, and commercial success of Another One Bites the Dust. And then there's Roger and Brian, who are the rock camp. So the sequence of how this album's recorded was basically side B first and then side A. They recorded stuff like Put Out the Fire and I think Calling All Girls first in Montreux, as the studio that they now own, that Bowie and everybody, REO Speedwagon, Deep Purple, all recorded in. They bought it so they could sit there and compose music and write songs in the studio. And then a couple months later, they go to Musicland in Munich. They've already switched to Reinhold Mack for the Game, but they bring Mack into Musicland, the studio that's owned by, or at least founded by, Giorgio Moroder. And now Giorgio Moroder is arguably the inventor of disco or electronic disco, for sure. The guy behind I Feel Loved by Donna Summer. Basically, they're disco and synth central socially and musically. And Freddie is going to gay bars in Munich, and there are 2 camps there too, the hetero camp and the gay camp. From Freddie, if he wasn't out before, he's out and about now. He's single and he wants to mingle. He laughs. He's going out and listening to disco, and he wants to get that energy going with the new Queen material. That's where songs like Staying Power, Body Language come from, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of the background on this record. And obviously, we've got the album cover looked like that. The back cover was kind of the same thing. They already had kind of a bad album cover thing started with the previous album. But yeah, and then again, this album obviously kind of bombed, and they didn't play a lot of songs off it, and they never toured America again after 1982. And that's just the, I won't go into, because my time is almost up, but I'll just throw out my rating and let you guys kind of do more of the opinionating on this one now that I've kind of, laid down kind of how it went down. I'm going to give this record a I'm going to give it a 5.5 out of 10. How's that? So there you go, Marco.
Right.
I don't know who's next. It's up to you.
I've recorded your number. I got everybody. I'm going to record everyone's number, and then we'll have an average number at the end.
Okay.
So we'll give it from all 12 of us, however many of us there are here.
Okay.
I'm gonna throw it over to Joe next, since you're wearing the Hot Space Tour T-shirt.
So this was a great tour, but as I told you yesterday when we spoke, Marco, when great bands make bad albums, this is the worst album by a great band. I can't stand this album, aside from Under Pressure, which I think was thrown on as kind of a maybe an emergency rescue of this. But reading, Martin's book and doing background on this, it seems like this is a band that was trying to emulate Another One Bites the Dust again on a whole album or most of the album. And there was way too much money, way too much cocaine. And there was Freddie's manager was dictating a lot of what was going on. And it's just a disaster. I mean, the tour was great. That's why I'm wearing the shirt. But yeah, nay on this. And I would give it 2 out of 10 just for the fact Under Pressure is on it. The rest of it, I can't listen to it.
Wow.
So.
Okay. Joe, tell us how you really feel, Joe.
No, it's definitely, I gave it some thought, and it's the worst album by a great band. So
awesome. Thanks, Joe.
I think Made in Heaven is the worst one. I don't know. I just never got that. I've got a whole spiel on that, but we won't go into that.
Jamie, you're up next.
All right. Believe it or not, I never heard this album until yesterday. Oh, and I went ahead and listened to it 3 times. So here is a new perspective. I didn't go into it hoping for the best in 1982. I went into it knowing everybody hates it. So the very first song came on, Staying Power, and I was amazed at how much Freddie is into it. Like, he really thinks he's kicking ass, I think. It reminds me, like, if he was playing in front of a crowd and doing this song, Staying Power, and he's into it. He doesn't even notice the crowd, and he's sweating, and he's kicking ass. And when it's over, he turns around, and he's breathing, and there's no one there. They all left. That's what the image I got.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's all bad. Side 1, which I think everyone thinks is the worst side, is pretty bad. Action This Day, maybe that could be better with a different approach. That's what I was. Then I heard the live version on the deluxe copy, and the live version, even though they rocked it up, it's still kind of more annoying somehow. Put Out the Fire is the first song on side 2, but when I was listening to it all in a row, I was thinking, this song ain't bad, or does it just not seem bad because of the 5 songs or 4 songs that came before it? I think it's not a terrible song, but the French song, Las Palabras De Amor, if I made a Queen best of CD, I think that song would go on it. I think I dig it. Great melody, nice acoustic guitars, nice textures and harmonizing. It's like a lighter song. You get out the lighter at the concert. Under Pressure feels like it's tacked on. I mean, it feels like you bought a deluxe copy and they just hey, it was only available on a single, but now for the first time on a CD, we tacked it on for you. But I mean, it is a great song though. 1 out of 10. I mean, because there's a few songs that aren't awful, I think I'd give it a 5, a solid 5.
5. All right. Cool.
Nice. Thanks.
Yeah,
Jamie.
just quickly, the whole idea with Under Pressure is Bowie was around, like Daniel said, people were recording it, and they just had this idea to do this kind of vocal jam, and it was a bit of a competitive thing, and I think it was Freddie that came up with the idea. Forgive me if someone else was going to tell this story, but Freddie, I think, came up with the idea of let's record our parts not knowing what the other guy is doing. And they agreed on this. And then Freddie cheated and listened to David's part. And David was like, wow, it's amazing how you kind of dovetailed with me so good on that, not knowing what I was doing or whatever. So, and then things got a little precious with egos later on with the mix and going back to New York and all that. But it's a massive song. It was a huge hit. And it's really the main reason this record went gold. So anyways. move on, Marco.
Nice. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Martin. Reed, I saw you trying to jump in there. Did you want to share something, or you might as well go next?
Oh, well, I was just going to say Las Palabras de Amor, or that's Spanish. The words of love. Las Palabras de Amor, the words of love. All right. So actually, kind of along with Jamie, I had never heard this album before you guys started talking about, hey, let's talk about it. So I listened to it. And when the first song started, I thought I had accidentally plugged into Michael Jackson's Thriller. So I had to stop and go to Wikipedia and look it up. And of course, one of the first things is it says Michael Jackson was a huge fan of this album and borrowed the sound for Thriller, which did not surprise me in the least. So I'm not a huge Queen fan, actually. Queen is a greatest hits band for me. Like the hits, don't really listen to any of the rest of the stuff. But I am a huge David Bowie fan. So I'm going to pack on a little bit of stuff to what Martin was talking about. So I love the song Under Pressure. Love it to death. I think it's one of the best pop tunes to come out of the 80s, period. To me, it's a David Bowie jam that happens to have Queen performing on it. All of the, and it's an accidental masterpiece. It started out as a studio jam that Queen lost interest in halfway through, and they didn't attempt to retake ownership until it became a massive hit on MTV. And then they were on videos going, oh, well, that was Freddie doing this. It's clearly not Freddie writing that song. They wrote the lyrics using David Bowie's cut-up technique. If you're not familiar with this, you just take a subject, write down a whole bunch of the first things that come to your mind about that subject, and then literally take scissors, cut them up into lines, rearrange them so that they make lyrics. If you listen to the lyrics on that song, they make no narrative sense whatsoever because they were never intended to. And what that's supposed to do is kind of connect you subliminally. It's more like a dream. You pick up the theme without really getting a story. And then when they made the video, neither band was available. And the guy who did the video ironically does basically the same thing. He takes a bunch of public domain images that might have something to do with being under pressure, ties them together. And I think, again, accidentally creates this incredible synergy between the video and the song. So it's just this astounding accidental masterpiece. And all of the scat singing from Freddie Mercury, that was placeholder. That wasn't supposed to be in the final product. He was just doing that in the studio. This is what I've read. I mean, it's not like I was there, but he was doing that in the studio. And then when Queen lost interest and David Bowie took the song, he mixed that stuff in, and doggone it, sounds perfect. And then the parts where they're singing duets, and I absolutely believe that Freddie listened to David's parts because those duets are astounding. The idea that anybody could do those off the cuff would be even more genius. But yeah, that song is a 10 out of 10. The rest of the album, it raised some eyebrows on me. I got to tell you, I was not expecting a dance album when I listened to it. So I would give the rest of the album about a 4. I think the dance songs are fine. It's just not what I was expecting from Queen. I think it's what most people would not want from Queen. But Under Pressure is 10 out of 10 for me. So I'm going to just put that all together and give it a 5.
Nice.
Nice.
Good.
Thanks, Reed. Tim, why don't you go next, and also let us know where to find your channel too, Tim's Vinyl Confessions.
Well, thank you, Marco. Yeah, Tim's Vinyl Confessions on YouTube. I've done many a Queen episode. I held this book up. This is a great book, Martin's Queen book. I've read it I don't know how many times. It's got some great insights, and he got a great bunch of people together to talk about the Queen catalog. So I, like a lot of people my age, of course,
including Tim, the very coolest thing, the highlight of my whole dang career doing this, Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
That was
awesome.
Amazing. Yeah.
So obviously I'd heard of Queen from an early age. When I was 6, that was 1980. Another One Bites the Dust is one of the first contemporary songs I remember hearing on the radio, not to mention Crazy Little Thing Called Love, but I was years before I realized Crazy Little Thing Called Love, number 1 was Queen, number 2 was a cover. And I didn't know it was from 1980. I just knew the song. So I was aware of who Queen was. I got into music years later. 1992, of course, I think a lot of people my age rediscovered Queen. because of Bohemian Rhapsody and Wayne's World. I'm happy to say that that happened for me a little bit sooner than that, because me and a friend of mine were at another friend's house. His father had a pretty good classic rock album collection. One of those was A Night at the Opera. Listened to A Night at the Opera all the way through. Couldn't believe the variety. Couldn't believe how heavy Death on Two Legs was, and every song was different than the next. So I bought Night at the Opera. And by the end of 1992, I bought all the Queen studio albums. Ironically, Hot Space was the last one that I bought. And I'd read a little bit about it to know that chances are I'm not going to like it anywhere as much as A Night at the Opera or Jazz, or, you know, I've got my favorite Queen albums. It's fun. Reed mentioned the Thriller reference. That is absolutely, I was going to talk about that. Michael Jackson and Freddie Mercury hung out during this time. Apparently, Michael Jackson was the one that convinced the band to put Another One Bites the Dust out as a single. And if you listen to the beginning of Staying Power, just the first few bars, and then you put on Wanna Be Starting Something, the first song on Thriller, there's a lot of similarities there. The difference is that Michael Jackson's a pop act that can sneak a rock song in like he did with Beat It and have Eddie Van Halen on it. And everybody thinks it's so cool and so dynamic and great. Queen is a rock band that snuck one rock song in on their album, as in Put Out the Fire. That's the short version of it. To give you an idea, it's the only one of Queen's original albums I have unopened. I found it used about the mid-90s. As you can see, it's marked, it's marked down to $3.99. I don't know where it came from originally. I do know that it's got a little cutout here. So there was probably a lot of these. So there you go. It was also, I have to show this off too before I get into the songs. It was the last Queen album to be released on 8-track in a retail form. This is a US copy of that, not the easiest thing to find. And just because I tried to find all of the cassettes to the Queen albums that weren't the Hollywood issues, which by the way is not easy to find these days. Usually you can't find anything before Hollywood. You can't find a Capitol or Elektra versions. Now that I got that out of the way, what do I think of the album? I'm amazed that Body Language did as well as it did. That song got to number 11 in the US. It went all the way to number 3 in Canada. And I looked it up on the old RPM chart. RPM magazine was basically the equivalent of Billboard. And get this, for 5 weeks, 5 weeks, starting June 26, 1982, this was the top 3 songs in Canada. Number 3, Body Language. Number 2, Ebony and Ivory, Stevie Wonder and Paul McCartney. And number 1, and if you don't know the song, you are lucky. It's a wretched song, Charlene, I've Never Been to Me. Those were the top 3 songs in Canada for 5 straight weeks. And it's funny because a song that hit number 11 in the States and number 3 in Canada, I had never heard in my life before I heard Hot Space. Like I said, I knew Another One Bites the Dust. I knew Crazy Little Thing Called Love, just having the radio on. And then I knew Radio Gaga from the video and pretty much everything that came out after that. How did that song do so well? And yet I didn't know it. Like, it obviously didn't pass into popular culture. I actually really like Dancer. I really like that song. To me, there's a rock song hidden in there, not just because it's written by Brian May. I think it could have been a really cool groove of a song. I would love to have heard it with more of a Dragon Attack approach. One of the cool things I remember is when Extreme played on the Freddie Mercury Concert for Life. They did a Queen medley, which was really, really cool. But when they start Another One Bites the Dust, Nuno starts playing some licks, and he plays this really cool lick that I later realized is from the end of Dancer. Back Chat, you know, I got to say, it's catchy. It's an earworm. Is it a rock song? No. I really like Action This Day. I don't know what the deal is with that weird synthesizer solo in it. I wish it had a guitar solo. Life is Real is fine as a tribute to John Lennon. Put Out the Fire. It's not my favorite of their hard rocking songs, but like Jamie said, by the time you get to it, it's like, whew, some guitar. Calling All Girls, not crazy, but I do like Las Palabras de Amor. Cool Cat, I don't even remember how that goes. And then Under Pressure is a masterpiece, but I don't even consider Under Pressure part of this album because it had already come out in most countries' version of Greatest Hits or Greatest Hits 1 or as a standalone single. And it doesn't sound anything like the rest of the album, really. I mean, it's a magnificent song, but I really don't think it belongs. And I think was it Reed or Joe? Joe referenced the tour. If you want a taste of what that tour was like, pick this up, Queen on Fire, Live at the Bowl. The version of Staying Power on here is a lot better than on the album. They do Action This Day. Of course, they do Under Pressure. And it seems to me there's one more Backjack. As far as my rating goes, I'm going to give it a solid 5 because it is Queen and there's a certain amount of excellence to what Queen does. I used to think it was their worst album. After listening to a lot of the Queen catalog, I don't think that anymore. I think A Kind of Magic is their worst album. This is probably the second worst.
I could just brief, you mentioned the Michael Jackson. I did have a conversation last month with a Hollywood insider. He has a really famous website. And we talked about when Freddie Mercury worked with Michael Jackson. And apparently that only lasted a couple days. He's like, this guy is so weird. Get me out of here. This is according to the Hollywood insider I spoke with.
But Freddie or Mike?
Mercury could not take him.
Who was the weird one?
So.
Yeah, who was the weird one?
Michael
Who was the weird one, Joe?
Pardon me? No, Freddie could not take Michael Jackson.
Okay.
He's like,
That's what I was thinking too.
Rescue me.
Okay, yeah, me too. I just wanted to make sure.
I'm gonna go next, real quick, just because I noticed all these votes are so low. I'm gonna kind of boost the vote up a little bit, but I'm gonna go yay on the record. I mean, like, I actually quite enjoyed listening to it, and I've been listening to it quite a bit for the last couple of weeks. I think there's some guitars on some other tracks too, like Back Chat, I think was another one that had some cool guitar in there. But the one song I think on this album that I don't like, that I skip, the one song on this album that I skip is Life Is Real. That's the only one I just doesn't do anything for me, like, at all. But everything else was listenable, and I didn't find the record. It's definitely like very 80s. And it's already been mentioned like 2 or 3 times, but Michael Jackson is definitely like what I've thought of listening to this record. It's definitely like a pop record, but I don't think anything's wrong with that. I think quite a few of the songs are quite good, you know, like they're kind of, there's more of a danceable beat. Maybe it's kind of rock dance or whatever, but I didn't mind it. I thought the performances were good. The production is really good. The production is very slick. The between the instrumentation, like you can totally hear, like Freddie is up front where he should be. All the vocals kind of line up. You know, Put Out the Fires, one of those rock tracks that people have already mentioned. Back Chat was another one that I liked. Dancer was a good one. Staying Power. There's a lot of good tracks on this record that I like. Even the French titled one I like. Like I said, the only thing I didn't like on this was Life Is Hard. Unfortunately, because I know it's a tribute to John Lennon. It has nothing to do with my appreciation of John Lennon. But I'm going to go and give this record, I'm going to say, I was going to give it like a 7.5, but I don't know. Everybody's vote is kind of bringing mine down a little bit. I'll say 7. I'll say 7.5. That's what I was going to go with initially. I'll stick with 7.5. And I'm going to throw it over to Nick next.
Thanks, Margo. I'm on my cell phone, so if it's a little disjointed, I was in transit. That's why I logged in late. What makes Queen great? Let's see. Freddie Mercury's vocals, Brian May's guitar, soaring background vocals, and maybe to a lesser extent, a really, really world-class rhythm section. Side one has none of those things. Brian May, I'm glad they found him. I assumed that he was on the side of a milk carton because he was missing. Side two is a bit better. Put Out the Fire is well-timed because side one for me was like a dumpster fire. As been said many times now, Under Pressure seems like it's been bolted on here and is really kind of disjointed from the rest of the album. And I missed a little bit of what Martin was saying, and I read a little bit about it because I was really unfamiliar with this album. But to me, it just struck me as this was a major ego trip for Mercury, and it should have been a solo album. He could have went off and done his thing and come back to Queen. But to me, this was like something that's like a career killer. And the funny thing is, this was unnecessary, this kind of thing. They're sitting on top of the world with The Game. It was a massive hit, phenomenal album. I went back to listen to The Game when listening to this thing, and I forgot how much I loved that album. But I at this, we saw the Kiss was flailing around. That's why they did something like The Elder, but there's really no reason for this. They did something that was such a from left field, but it strikes me as a big ego thing. And that's how bands break up and business partnerships dissolve. But I was not a fan of this thing. Side 2 is a bit better. If I was going to give it a rating, I'd give it a 3.
Okay. Wow.
Nice. Right on, Nick. Thank you. I'm
3.
going to throw it over to Andee next. And again, Andee, if you want to plug anything, let people know where to find your music and stuff, go right ahead.
Oh, well, the new thing this week, Jason Bieler has a new single called Human Head that I played on. Jason Bieler, the Saigon Kick guy. So that's the new thing that's out this week. Working on new music with KMFDM. That won't be happening until next year as far as a release. As far as Hot Space, I'm a longtime defender of this album. Queen is maybe my favorite band, maybe my second favorite, depending upon the day.
Nice.
It's definitely off-putting to listen to at first, but ultimately I think it's a really misrepresented album. I think it's inaccurate to call it a dance album. Surely inaccurate to call it a disco album. Now, the first half of it is definitely dance leaning. I don't know that I would call it all disco. There's some stuff on there that they definitely had done versions of going back as far as 1977. Dancer is the kind of thing that they did with Fight from the Inside and Fun It and Dragon Attack, and obviously another one, Bites the Dust. The synth bass, the drum machines, it's sort of a lot to take in all at once, especially if you're one of these people that likes to hear the whole band. The first song comes on and it's kind of like the Freddie show. Not only that, but they've got Tower of Power horns. So there's like more outside musicians than band members on the first song. But that said, is that a bad song? No, I think it's a really good, cracking, up-tempo, hook-laden dance tune. I think the album overall is creatively brave. It's a little bit lopsided for sure. I think that you can tell that Brian and Roger were not as on board. But I think that they all committed themselves admirably to the whole thing. My least favorite song is actually Body Language. I think there's just so little to it. I don't mind the minimalism as far as the instrumental side of it, but the lyrics and everything is just, Freddie basically breathing heavily for 3.5 minutes.
Does anyone remember that on the radio at all here? Does anyone?
No, I really don't either. I have the single, right? No, just don't remember seeing it. Even up here in Canada.
It definitely played here a fair bit in Australia.
Didn't it make it on one of the greatest hits?
Volume 3?
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. I think it's an ill-advised single. I love Action This Day. I don't know why anybody is down on that track. It's a Roger Taylor song. He always writes good songs, I think. I love the call and response between him and Freddie and the vocals. I love the saxophone solo in that song. It is so melancholy and so dusky. And, the lyrics in that song are kind of the first sign of warmth on this album. It's kind of cold feeling up until then. Between the kind of bloodless drum machines and the lack of John Deacon playing electric bass and the lack of Brian and everything, it feels a little sterile at times. But again, Queen to me are 4 people who will try anything under the sun. And the sound of the band is those 4 guys playing any kind of music they decide to play. And they usually succeed. So the fact that they didn't necessarily succeed on every song on this album, I'm not going to fault them too much for that. I think it took bravery to do it. Side 2, I think, has no business being called dance music in any way, shape, or form. You've got Put Out the Fire. You've got Life is Real, which is this beautiful, I just found out that the first 3 piano notes were meant to echo the first 3 bells in John Lennon's Starting Over, which was his last single. Beautiful song. Guilt Stains on My Pillow, Blood on My Terraces. Those first 2 lines, Freddie says more. Then he said on the whole first side, you know, which is just pure hedonism and party time and everything. But you get this really beautiful stuff on side 2. Calling All Girls is a perfectly breezy kind of campfire pop song, another Roger Taylor song, kind of lyrically echoing the other tune that he wrote in the album, you know, love around the world, you know, boys and girls, a little basic, but Las Palabras de Amor should be hailed as one of the greatest songs. To me, this is following in the footsteps of Save Me and Teo Toriate. It just has everything. And there's so much beautiful restraint in it. You know, it's just the guitar solo. It's kind of like this really kind of delicate electric thing and a little bit of acoustic. And then the synthesizer. I love the use of synthesizers on some of these tunes on the second half. And the last 2 songs, so we've got Cool Cat, which apparently Bowie was also involved in, and his parts were cut at his request. I think that's a great song for Freddie. His vocal is to die for on that. That's pure Aretha Franklin worship. All falsetto. That's never happened in another Queen song as far as I know, and it's devastating. Now, again, it's lopsided. It's only John and Freddie on that song. There's no Brian. I don't even think Roger played drums. Apparently John played drums on that. So I'm not such a fan of that, but you know, these guys are always known for trying to play all the instruments on their respective songs. And I don't like that Under Pressure is on this album. It was already a single. It was already on a greatest hits album. So I don't know if they just tried to upgrade, you know, the status of this album that they weren't very confident about by tacking it on, but I don't like that it's there. It's a great song. Everybody knows that. Anyway, so I'll give this a 7 out of 10. I go back to this album more than a lot of Queen albums. I don't listen to A Kind of Magic. I don't listen to Made in Heaven. Even some of their really, really popular albums, I don't go back to as much because I'm kind of tired of some of the tunes. This album kind of feels like it's all mine. I don't ever have to hear these songs in public. So yeah, I'm a fan of Hot Space. I'm giving it 7 stars.
Nice.
That's
Thanks,
beautiful,
Andy.
Andy. That was really cool. Awesome.
Thanks, Andy. Todd, you look like you got something nice to say about the album, so I'm going to throw it over to you.
I do.
Wrong, but...
I was in the 12th grade when this album came out, and I was just a month away from graduating. So I remember the bad reaction to it and the backlash very well. And it was funny because when the Hot Space tour came through Atlanta, Billy Squier was the opener, and the cool thing to say was, "I'm going to see Billy Squier. I don't even want to see Queen." And then, of course, after the show happened, we were like, "Okay, what do you think now?" Because the tour was fantastic. But I had something, I thought I knew what I was going to say about this, and I listened to it again a couple of days ago, and I had to change one thing. I used to think that the biggest issue with this album was, and the reception of this album was, that they put 3 dance R&B type tracks at the beginning. And then once you get through those, what's next? Body Language. So if you're looking for a rock song, you're really still waiting. But I listened to Dancer again, and I think Dancer, like somebody said previous, is really a rock song. It's funny. It sounds like Billy Squier to me. It sounds like The Stroke. I mean, it's got the same Mac drum sound, and it's got, not only does it have a big Brian May solo in it, but it has a guitar orchestration Brian May solo. So it's really better than I thought it was. And so I wouldn't necessarily say that they let off with 3 songs that are kind of tough sells, but I still kind of feel a little bit that way. Action This Day I love, but I always like all the Roger songs. And I like the quirky new wave kind of feel of that song. I think Put Out the Fire is a pretty heavy track for this album. It's really well recorded. I think the engineering on that song is really great. I think that I think Life Is Real is really good. Calling All Girls I like a lot, but I don't think it was that great of a single. I feel like it kind of sounds just a little bit unfinished, like maybe it's not all there. Las Palabras De Amor, I absolutely love. And I think if anybody hasn't seen the video to that, which you can watch on YouTube, I think it's just their Top of the Pops performance.
Yeah.
But it's just a live TV performance. And we're so accustomed to seeing Queen and all their videos and the things that you see over and over and over. But the first time I saw that was about 10 years ago. I got really emotional about it because I'd never seen it before. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's Queen playing a song, just, without any other visuals. And that really does something for me. And I really like that. So if anybody hasn't seen the Las Palabras De Amor video, look that up on YouTube because it's really good. Cool Cat I didn't used to like. I like it better now. It's really sparse. So, but I think now, as my 57-year-old ears think that that's more interesting than I did when I was in high school. And I'm okay with Under Pressure being tacked onto it. I remember when the album came out, I felt like that was a surprise because I didn't think they would do that. So I'm okay with it being there. I would give this album a 7.5. I liked it a lot better when I was younger than I do now, but I still think it's pretty good. I'd give it a 7.5. And I almost said 8, but I think I'm going to dial it back to 7.5.
Wow.
Nice.
Pretty
Thanks,
cool.
Todd.
Nice analysis. Yeah.
Ryan,
Good.
I'm going to throw it over to you, buddy. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Yeah, this one, I'll just start this off by saying that I think Queen peaked early as a band with the debut and Queen 2. Those are my two favorite Queen albums. I love the entire 70s run a lot. I have them all on vinyl. Game's a pretty good record too. And so I had heard this album, I think a few years ago, like once, and I didn't really think too much of it. But when I saw that we were doing this, I was like, that's an album I need to revisit. So I did, and I've been listening to it way more than I expected myself to be listening to it, honestly. Like I already made my opinion a few days ago on it, and I'm still listening to it. It's a really good album, honestly. I'm quite a fan. Like I think that the whole first side is absolutely perfect. I love Staying Power. It has a really good groove to it. Really good production too. Freddie's vocals I think are awesome on it, and I don't know, it is kind of like a dance tune, but it still rocks in a way too. Like I don't know, it's strange, but I really like that a lot. And Dancer, I agree with a few people who've said it already. It's a really rocking song. The whole Billy Squier comparison's spot on with that. I think the guitar is really cool in that, like a little bit later into the songs. It starts off a bit synthier. I think there's like is there steel guitar in the middle of that song? It kind of sounded like it, or maybe it's just the way that Brian was playing it, but it kind of sounded a little bit like steel guitar to me. But yeah, really cool song there. Backcheck is cheesy, but I really like it. Like I could still groove out to it. It's kind of like a moody, like new wave type of song with a groove. I think Freddie's vocals are a little bit weird on it. They kind of have like a George Michael Wham type of sound to them, but like I still dig it. Body Language, I think it's one of the weaker songs on the album, but I still like it. The bass line's cool. It's catchy. Like I don't really understand why it was such a big hit, but I dig it still. Action This Day is awesome. It's kind of like a more hard rock and new wave song. I love Freddie's vocals on that, especially. Really good stuff there. Put Out the Fire took me a minute to get into. Like I think that the chorus is awesome on it. A lot of the music is really great on it, but Freddie's verse is a little bit iffy. Kind of sounds like a coked out Dirk Diggler on it, but like, but like I still think it's a really good song. Life is Real is awesome in my opinion. I think it's a really beautiful song. It's one of my favorites on the whole album. I can definitely hear the tribute to John Lennon on it in the music, in the bells at the beginning. And Freddie's vocal performance is really beautiful on it too. I think it's a very effective song. It's one that, I added a few songs of this to just my like regular playlist of music when I'm in the car. I mostly listen to vinyl like at home. I only listen to it. I have a whole channel about it. I'll talk about that later. But yeah, this song I put on my playlist to listen to more often. Calling All Girls, I think, is one of the weaker songs on the album. I still think it's a well-produced song. It's good musically. I mean, it's catchy enough. It's just it didn't affect me as much personally. Las Palabras De Amor, I do really like. It's a pretty beautiful song. Really good vocals and like backup vocals on that one too. Cool Cat might honestly be my favorite song on this whole album. I think it's fantastic. Freddie's falsetto vocals are amazing, and I'm glad, Andy, that you mentioned that David Bowie was supposed to be on the song too, because that was something I was dying to say myself too. But yeah, I just think his vocals are awesome. I love that it kind of has like a jazzy pseudo reggae type of feel to it with the slap bass and stuff. It's just a great song to chill out to. Like I was listening to it a lot in the car, and it just put me in a really good mood. And then I will say, I do think that having Under Pressure on the album was a mistake. I do know that they needed like a single, and that was a successful song for them. And it's a great song by all means, but I feel like it sounds so out of place with the rest of the album. I think for the most part, this album is really brave creatively. I think you have a lot of different sounds like dance music, a little bit of disco-ish type stuff, funk music. You've got R&B, you have rockers, you have slower stuff, and it's all together, and it's kind of like all over the place in styles, but it works. Like you don't know what you're going to expect next on the album. And then I feel like Under Pressure is probably the most streamlined song on the album. And while it's an awesome song, it just does not work for me because everything else is kind of adventurous. And that one, I don't know, I could kind of expect it more. And with that being said, the vocals by Bowie and Freddie Mercury are fantastic on there. It's musically great. That part near the end, where Freddie does his like screams, and then it goes into that last like verse or whatever it is. And I think that's so beautiful. It gives me chills every time, just the way the two of them matched up together on that, but not a good fit for this album at all. But yeah, I mean, it's a weird album. It's not the strongest by Queen by any means. Like I said, first two are my absolute favorites, and Sheer Heart Attack is probably after that. After that, maybe Day at the Races, Night at the Opera, Jazz. But I think I might honestly like Hot Space more than I like The Game. And I know that might be sacrilege for a lot of people, but I don't know. I've heard so many of the songs on The Game so many times that it just doesn't have the same effect to me that it did when I was like 12. And so if I was going to go back and pick a Queen album, I'd probably choose this one next. And my rating for this album, I'm going to give it a solid. If I'm going to give Queen one a 10, because I do think it's a 10 out of 10 album, I'd probably give this a 7.5 out of 5. Like it's not the strongest Queen album ever. There is moments that aren't effective as others, but I think when this album has highs, which I think is most of the album, it's really, really high. And like I said, I do have a channel. It's called Ryan's Vinyl Destination. I only talk about vinyl on it. And when I say vinyl, I mean only albums that were originally released on vinyl. There isn't any, it was originally released on CD. Now it's on vinyl for $30. There's none of that. It's all classic vinyl. Talk about all genres, mostly like rock, hard rock, prog, but also some jazz, some R&B, funk, pretty much everything. I do like album hauls that I find, rankings. I do reviews on individual albums, all kind of stuff. So definitely make sure to check it out. And that's all I have for this one. I think it's a great album, and I'm really glad that I've been revisiting it recently.
Cool. Thanks, Ryan. That's awesome.
Very nice.
Can't wait to check out your channel.
Yeah.
Brett, I'm going to throw it over to you, buddy.
Awesome, thanks. And by the way, Ryan, I subscribed to your page the other day. I've been watching some of the videos. It's some real cool stuff that you got going on over there.
Thank you.
Much like Reed and Jamie, this was actually the first time I had listened to this album. I'd listened to it a couple times this week already. So when it comes to Queen, I'm a fan of everything from the first album up till the game, even the Flash Gordon soundtrack, if you want to consider that a studio record. So, and anything beyond that, I'm familiar with in terms of singles and what was released. But obviously I went in knowing that this was going to be a very different record compared to what they had been known for up until that point. But overall, I'd say I listening to the full album, I really enjoyed it. I'm a fan of dance music. I'm a fan of a lot of the outside influences that they brought in for the record. So I was able to appreciate that and everything that brought to the record overall. I also went in expecting that it was going to be a full album that sounded like that first side. So by the time I got to the second side, I was actually pleasantly surprised when I realized that, most of those songs on that second side could have passed for Queen songs that came on the albums, that came off any of the albums that came before that. I would say maybe, actually, no, yeah, all the songs on that second side, I would say had like that big classic Queen sound, especially songs like Put Out the Fire and Life is Real, the song that they did for John Lennon. I think it was, who was it? I think Tim had brought up that he had noticed that Nuno Bettencourt had played riffs from this album when they performed with the Queen tribute show. And when I was doing research, I found a quote from Nuno that said, I think it's interesting because the album taught me two things. It taught me that even if you're in a band as a guitar player, music doesn't always have to be driven by guitar. It's all about the song first. So I thought that was actually pretty cool. And I guess the last thing I have to say would kind of maybe be a question towards, if anyone would know, it'd probably be Martin. Obviously by 1982, like disco and dance music was kind of on its way down. Do you think that if maybe the album came out like 2 or 3 years earlier, it would have done better in terms of like the dance and those influences that were on the record?
Well, I guess it would have been in the milieu with, I Was Made for Loving You and Rod Stewart and the Rolling Stones and all that, but they had already been to that place with the game and done well with it, right? The game, it's interesting. The game is almost like one of those, I was Facebooking with someone today. Actually, it was you, Jamie. Yeah, about the whole Cusp album thing, right?
Yes.
But what did you call it? Transition albums.
Yes.
And you brought up the game as a great transition album where it seems like it's halfways between the old days and the new days, right?
Right.
Okay.
And
that
so that's kind of interesting. But I don't know. I mean, at this point also, you're starting to, at least in the UK, get into that minimalist dance music synthesizer stuff.
Yeah, like a lot of the new wave stuff that was coming out.
So
that's pretty much all I have to say about it. In terms of rating, I think I would probably give it, about a 6.5.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you were saying about the game being a transitional album, because if you look at when that was recorded, like there were a bunch of tracks that were recorded in 79 and then more that were recorded in 80. And they do seem quite different from one another. And you can see where they're going from 79 to 80.
Listen, if I remember correctly, Crazy Little Thing Called Love came out some time before the game actually came out. It was almost like an Under Pressure release in timeline. Yeah.
And the weird thing is that that's so far in advance of the rockabilly craze, right? It's like literally 3 years before Stray Cats and Honey Drippers and all that, I think, if I remember correctly, which is kind of funny, right? But,
all
yeah, I
right.
think the Stray Cats were big in the UK for like 2, even though they're American. I think they were big in the UK for like 2 years before.
Oh, were they? Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. The funny thing, like Jamie, in calling the game a transitional album, but it's almost like random and it just turns out in history looking back that it's a transitional album because they were almost like hit by a freight train of of this split in the band at this point, which wasn't really the case before. It was just a little dabbling politely, and then they were more in tune with each other. But at this point, it was like Freddie completely immersing himself in the Munich club culture and all that, right? That really drove this. So it's almost like the game like feels like a transitional album, but really the narrative is not really like that. It was more chaotic, I suppose, more chaotic and energy laden between Montreux and Munich and that whole thing, right? And these guys like fighting, and then Freddie's manager coming in and the whole thing. It's almost like they were just like, you know, hit with a hot mess, basically, at this point.
I just want to say,
hard to argue with success, right? Because Another One Bites the Dust was so big, it was so huge. How could that not impact their work from that point on?
I just wanted to add that I did not give this an average rating because I don't like pop music, because I got Taylor Dane albums downstairs, for crying out loud. But it doesn't always work all the time, pop music. And I don't think all of these are great pop songs.
All right, we got one guy left, and I'm going to throw it over to Bicycle Legs to take us home.
Oh, thanks, Marco. I like this album. I think it's definitely a departure for Queen, and it's not what the fans were expecting. And I can understand why it didn't do well. But having said that, I think there's some really good songs on this album. I'm going to disagree with a couple of the other panelists on a couple of things, though. Looking through it, this is my vinyl copy of it. Looking through it, Staying Power, I think works. I think as a funk song, it really works. Dancer. A lot of people have said, oh, you know, that they quite like that song. And I've always found it funny that Brian May disowns this album, because for me, Dancer is the worst song on the album, because it kind of doesn't know what it is, whether it's a funk song, a dance song, or whether it's a rock song. And it tries to have it both ways and ends up having it neither, as far as I'm concerned. Backchat, good song, funky. Body Language was the single. And it came out when I was, I think, 11 years old. And as an 11-year-old, I thought it was terribly naughty, you know, the lyric. But I've always loved that synth bass in it. I think that's just funky as all get up. And I really enjoy that song just for that bass line, if nothing else. Action This Day. Yeah, both of Roger's songs on this album do have like a new wave feel to it. And I like that because new wave music is the first music I really got into as a kid, sort of late 70s, early 80s. Put Out the Fire. Yeah, you get to the B-side, and it is very much an album of two halves, isn't it? Where you've got the funk side on one side, you've got the more traditional Queen on side two. Put Out the Fire is a good Brian song. Well, a middling Brian song. I think it's got some nice riffs and stuff in it, but Brian's written so many better songs than it. Life is Real, I think, is heartfelt. It's a fairly typical sort of Freddie piano ballad. And I think, yeah, I like it just because it's heartfelt, because of the subject matter. Calling All Girls, I've always really liked that song. Again, new wave sort of feel to it. And again, probably not a great single for Queen, because it was very, very different from even something like Another One Bites the Dust, because it really did have a new wave feel to it, which is something that Queen never did before and really never did after either. Las Palabras De Amor, that song could have fitted on Day at the Races quite easily, I think. Very traditional sort of Brian May ballad. Cool Cat is a soul song, pure and simple. It's a soul song. And Freddie's falsetto vocal in it, I think, is absolutely beautiful. And then, of course, Under Pressure, it does feel out of place because it's a different production team. It's Queen and David Bowie rather than Queen and Mac. You know, it doesn't have that Mac feel that the whole rest of the album has. Having said that, I love the fact that it's on the album simply because it's just such an outstanding song. But all in all, it's not my favorite Queen album by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's a worthy album, and I'm going to give it 7.5 out of 10.
Nice.
All right, awesome. Thanks a lot, everybody.
I forgot to mention too, for people that like chart stats, we were talking about body language, but Calling All Girls, I think reached somewhere in the 60s in the US. But in Canada, it hit the top 40. I think it hit like number 29, number 30, something like that. But then when I look into that, I think a lot of their singles did do a little bit better in Canada, because I think...
Has everyone gone mute?
No.
No, I'm still here.
I think Play the Game, Need Your Lovin' Tonight, and I even think Flash's theme all went top 40 in Canada, and they didn't in the States. So I don't know. I don't know if that means like per capita Queen, or by percentage Queen sold more albums, or not more albums, but percentage wise in Canada than they did in the States. I'm not sure about that, but it's interesting, because I think Calling All Girls and Body Language would, if I was an A&R rep listening to this album, those wouldn't have been the two singles I would have picked.
You know, so just going back to my t-shirt, the tour was awesome. But it was also the last time they played the United States until, I mean, that was the last time they played the United States with Freddie. And you know, subsequently, they with Wayne's World, and then the movie came out and everything. You know, last time I saw them with Adam Lambert at the United Center, it was packed like it was a Bulls or Blackhawks championship game. Like, it was the biggest attendance. They had standing room, you know, 4 back. So it's amazing. I would never in a million years think that Queen would return to that even bigger status.
With a new singer,
it was unbelievable.
Wow. Yeah. So I've been crunching the numbers here with a calculator, because math is my kryptonite. So on average, from all of our scores, we gave Hot Space a 5.75. It was looking kind of shaky there for a little while in the beginning, but yeah, so almost a 6 out of 10 almost. So cool. Thanks everybody for showing up and giving us your 2 cents. Stay tuned. Keep an eye out on Patreon. We'll do like another poll soon, and we'll kind of pick the next album that we're gonna maybe do a panel discussion on. I don't know when, but keep an eye out, because I'm gonna be taking suggestions, and we'll put up a new poll. And I'm gonna try to get this up for next weekend. I'm going to try to get, Martin and I filmed an episode that I'm going to try to put up, I think Thursday is when I'll have that one up, because I'm way too busy tomorrow, but I'm going to try to put this up on the weekend, maybe Sunday again. And then other than that, if you want to join our discussions, join us over at Patreon. We're doing all kinds of cool stuff there. I'm trying to get one-on-one episodes with everybody. So if anybody has an idea, shoot me a message. I'll try to schedule you in, and we'll keep the panel discussions going. This is really cool. And thanks everybody for showing up.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
Very cool.
Thanks, guys.
It was a lot of fun.
Thanks, everyone.